Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have some awesome stuff to jump into right away, but we're going to first say hi to Jason. Hey, Jason. Thanks for joining us.
Morning. How you
Hey,
guys
buddy.
doing?
How you doing?
Doing well. It's been a while since we all voluntarily threw ourselves out of an airplane together.
That's right. I guess the last time we hung out, it was in a dusty patch of land that had aircrafts landing and taking off.
Yeah, Good
Mhm.
times. Good times in the summer,
Good
for
times.
There's nothing quite like the sounds when you're having a conversation with people, and then all of a sudden you hear the brrrr of that airplane starting to take off, and then everyone kind of turns their head like, "Oh, who's going up now?"
sure. Yeah, the anticipation. Yeah.
I love that
Yeah,
stuff.
it's awesome. Hey, Winter Storm's here. Hey, how's
Well,
it
all
going, buddy?
right. It's nice to see Winter Storm 427
Yeah.
back in the game.
Back in the game. Awesome. So I have a couple of really good questions. So do you guys want to dive into them, or do you have anybody has any thoughts off
Bring
the
it.
top of their head? Okay.
Bring the
fire
best heat
away.
you got.
Okay. So we're gonna dive into this on the first question, which is from Daniel Levante yet from yesterday. Boom. What hindrances have you dealt with that have marked how the path ahead was dictated? That is a good
Ooh.
question. That is a good question. I'm gonna throw you under the bus here, Jason. You're up first.
Good. Screw that
Okay.
guy.
Hindrances that have dealt with that have marked the path ahead was dictated. I would have to say, if I went back to my military career and going through the training systems that we were going through, would be your own prejudices of the way that it should go. And then in your own mind how you think you're supposed to do, how you think you're supposed to perform, and then the difference between what you think and then what the actual expectation on the other side of the instructor's side is. um, and I think you're constantly playing a game of who's right, who's wrong, what's the actual best path to take. So that is no straight path, but that's a constant navigation of expectation versus reality, as you're moving forward. And I think that would be the same for whether you're pilot, pathfinder, combat engineer. It's the same for every trade and everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Any thoughts on that, Sean? You want to add on to that?
Yeah. I love that answer. It's so legit because it's exactly what I was thinking. And it's not legit because it's what I was thinking. It's legit because I know it to be the reality of things. And so, what hindrances? There's only two hindrances, there's you and the system wrapped around you. And if you understand both of those things well, the hindrances are less versus not knowing yourself and not knowing the system around you. Now you've got all kinds of hindrances. So I would say, if I was going to say what was the number one hindrance, it's always me
Yep.
not knowing how to do it the right way. And
Yeah.
and then how do you figure out how to do it the right way? You've got to understand what the system wants, or the system that's wrapped around you, and how you can effectively navigate that and move through it as seamless as possible, being as effective and efficient as possible. So the hindrance is always me. And then secondarily, it's my misunderstanding or lack of synchronization with the system wrapped around me.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think I really would just echo what you guys are saying, is that me all of the hindrances that I've ever dealt with throughout the military have been me across the board, and it didn't I didn't think of it as that while I was in it. It wasn't until I had hindsight to look back on it and go, oh yeah, I totally got in my own way there. I
Yep.
think that was the biggest one. Being
And
able to
I don't think it matters if you're a type A personality or not. Everybody puts so much pressure on themselves to perform in whatever they want to accomplish, that you get in your own way. And I think as you get more experience within that system that you're working in, the temperature comes down, you relax a little, and then you realize, okay, like it wasn't that big of a deal. I think people like watching people have helmet fires in basic training, doing like change parades and stuff. The most basic stuff. You're just like, you look back at it in hindsight, you're like, that was nothing. Like, why was I
what
so
was that
worked up
all
about that?
about? What was I
It
even
was nothing.
thinking?
Stupid. Yeah.
But it's a big deal at the time. And
It's a huge deal at the time.
That's the point, is if anyone's listening to this, the hindrance is always us. And it's because of our misunderstanding of what's happening in the moment, because we can't contextualize it against anything, because it's day one of the 1,000-day journey. And
Yep.
so, as we're all tripping out on day one about running around like chickens with our heads cut off, there's only two ways to get better at that game. You can do it all by yourself in isolation and through the grind, figure it out. And man, you're going to have the hard lessons. Or you can do it through a team wrapped around you. The system, we'll call it. You can interoperate with that, try to figure out how to do that better, synchronize up a little bit better. And that's going to
Mhm.
take out some of the sting of that day one chicken with your head cut off. Because now you can, with a team, figure it out together and ease back some of that insanity. But there's many ways to skin a cat, and as long as you're aware that nothing's easy until you figure it out. And the thing that you've got to figure out the most is you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest day one lesson, because I didn't learn that lesson until I was out of the military, and then I realized that I was the problem. So, what do you think is there a way to get that across? Is there a way to teach that to somebody to be like,
For sure.
understand that the problem is you? How
A,
do
a,
you?
a good instructor, a good teacher, whatever, will instill that, like, hey, you guys are a team, work through this together, go through your checklist together, quiz each other. If you don't know somebody's better at this side of the house than that, a good, like I said, a good instructor will be like, this is the way forward. This is how you guys should approach it. If you work as an individual, you're gonna fall behind. And I think that's what worked for me for sure.
Mm,
Yeah, I 100% back that. And I'd also like to add that a good instructor will not only incorporate those kind of things, but a good instructor will explain this to you. And if you never face another instructor in your life moving forward, whether they're good or bad is unimportant. Just listen to what I'm about to say right now. Someone who's going to guide you well will help you understand that your responsibility is not only to learn what's in front of you, but it is for you to understand what it means to you. So you're not just learning skills, you're learning yourself. Don't just think about how to strip and assemble a C7 rifle. Think about how to do that, plus how to learn yourself better, how to figure out who you are, how you work, how you think, how you play, how you interact. You've got to understand you while understanding all of it around you.
Yep.
mm. That's a great point. I, uh, as you were talking about stripping and assembling the C7, I was thinking to myself that it's not enough to just know how to strip and assemble a weapon. It's the reason why you strip and assemble a weapon. Because with my, I was a C9 gunner and I love my C9, and I could take that thing apart in the dark, put it back together again using all kinds of I knew that thing backwards and forwards, left and right. But it wasn't because I just enjoyed the fact that it was a machine gun. It was because I knew what it meant, right? And I knew that, if my machine gun goes down in the middle of a firefight, that's 40% of the firepower of that section. Just me, just my one machine gun. So I made sure that that thing was clean. It was functional. It worked when it got dirty. It worked. And but I think that's the big point, is understanding why you're doing something, not just the fact that you're doing something.
Yeah, and not just why. And just to build off of the example that you gave, it's not only a why you have to clean it, it's when you have to clean it. When
Yeah.
you don't clean it is in the middle of a firefight.
Yeah. It's not usually the best time period to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I should have oiled this.
Right. Oh, hang on a sec. I
Yeah.
didn't do what I was supposed to do, but now I'm in a firefight and I'm going to strip and assemble my rifle and do basic maintenance on it. No one does that.
Mm-mm.
But in life, guys do that because they're not stripping and assembling themselves. They're not figuring how to maintain their weapon themselves. But when they run into trouble, now they're trying to figure out how to do it and when to do it. And when to deal with the problem is not when you're in the middle of the problem, when you're in the middle of
Yeah.
the firefight. That
Mhm.
classic case of as an instructor, any instructor worth his salt who's being taught within the Canadian Army system would be able to do this: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Good afternoon. My name is Warrant Officer Sean Taylor. What I'm going to be teaching you this afternoon is how to strip and assemble the C7 rifle. How we're going to do, why we're going to do this, when we're going to do blah, 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 blah. All the details. I mean, I'll say any senior NCO should be able to rattle that stuff off like no thought.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
Purpose to the action. Yeah.
purpose to the action. And yet, in the world, in the lifestyle that they are now out of the military, they can't do that within their own life because they haven't established those same practices that they were really good at back in the day, but aren't incorporating now in order to move through life a little more seamlessly in a process that they were really good at, but now they're not good at anymore because they're not applying it.
That's a great point. Yeah. We got some comments on this exact point. So Eric says, if you spend any time looking inward, meditation or otherwise, as opposed to outward, reacting to all your circumstances and others, you quickly realize that you're always the common denominator.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that?
Just the other day, we were talking about how, people need to understand the large world around them, but an even larger world than the world around you is the world inside of you. I could spend the rest of my life exploring my inner world and still run out of time to figure it all out. But I've seen a lot of the external world, just not enough of my internal world. And so I think there couldn't be a truer sentence than the one that is just being listed by Eric.
Yeah, I agree. Any thoughts, Jason?
I think all of that that development comes with you challenging yourself, and whatever the case may be, going into the unknown, because that's where you find out who you really are, what your circumstances are, how you best adapt to those circumstances. You have to continue to challenge yourself to make that happen.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're
100%.
just complacent and nothing happens.
Yeah, and not only are you complacent for yourself, not only are you setting the tone for yourself, you're setting the tone for everyone around you.
Yep.
And whether that is your neighbors or your community or all veterans as a whole, I look at you as an example, Jason, and you crush it. And whenever you put out anything in respect to the broader community around you, it's very thoughtful, it's very impactful, it is legit. So you're not bouncing in every single day saying nonsense. You're bouncing in on occasion and dropping the heat. And so I like the way you do things. And I wish more people would approach things professionally like you do in all aspects of your life, at least from what I've seen. And
thank you.
It's a classic case of, in order for you to have done that, what you do now, I can see you relying on your military background. I can see you doing good common practices that work back in the day that still work in this life today. And you just have really professionalized them into a veteran production. I like it. It's great.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, the biggest thing for me is trying to take that symbolism that everybody has for their specific unit, and be able to produce the esprit de corps unit stuff for individuals, to make them take pride in what they're doing, which kind of goes back to the points we were just discussing. That's what it's all about for me.
Yeah. Pride is such a it can go too far, right? And there's unfortunately that type of pride can take you down alleys that you really don't want to go down. But at the same time, if you don't have much pride in where you're working or who you're working for, or why you're there, then you start to lose focus as to, like I said, why you're there, which then affects the mission, which then affects the next thing, which then affects goes down the range.
Pride can definitely slide into ego. And then that's where you're kind of crossing that line of going too far.
This is interesting to me because what I did was I set a stage prop off to the side here, and I wasn't sure if I was going to use it or not. I wasn't sure if I would incorporate it into this conversation, and because I wasn't sure where this conversation would go, or if it would be appropriate. But since we're at this point now where we're talking about pride and about ego and about Jason and what you provide for veterans and other organizations that are serving right now, etc. Like, okay, yeah, I was with JTF too. And I'm quietly proud of that. And I try not to chirp about it too much, but now I've become the guy who has to chirp about it a little bit. And so I was super uncomfortable with that, man. You guys already know that. But I'd never waved that flag ever. That wasn't, I just didn't do that. And so early in this whole podcasting thing, while I was still trying to figure out how to do it right or wrong or whatever, I bumped into Jason, and Jason was super helpful. And he said, hey, like anytime I can help, et cetera, et cetera. And so now I'm going to get to the point where we talk about pride and ego. My ego was not allowing me to talk openly about something that I should be proud of. But I had to figure out how to be prideful while not being too egotistical. And so now to the stage prop, which I wasn't sure if I was going to use, but now I'm gonna.
Boom.
Yes. Yeah.
And so there you go. That's a flag that I got from Jason. And by get, I mean I purchase. So this is not like a freebie that I owe Jason a little bit of social media time at all. I only give social media time to cool people who deserve cool time. And so that flag that I purchased represents the unit that I served with back in the day, JTF2 as the example. And so I don't fly that flag anywhere. It sits over there, hidden, carefully folded, and never seen by anyone else but me. Occasionally, it might make it into a photo, like Seb and I doing 7 days worth of interviews in order to, deeply consider life as an example that acted as a backdrop at that time. But other than that, I don't think I've ever flashed it beyond that point. So, I just flashed it, and not very long and not very well, but I use it to raise the point that what Jason is doing is taking veterans and other organizations and allowing them the opportunity to have some esprit de corps pride or some sort of connection with their identity from back in the day, and allow someone to consider, what does this mean to me, and how am I going to present that to the broader world around me. I think it's such a valuable service that you're doing. If you think about it, or if I think about it at a deeper level, it's a beautiful thing. But for each guy, each veteran, each unit, each subunit, they've all got to figure out how to use this sort of communication device to do it the right way, not the wrong way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate the words, by the way. Thank you. That's fantastic. Because that's what it's all about for me. That's why I did it. Whether it was a camouflage pattern national flag, just saying, hey, I served, I wore this uniform. And that's something that anybody who has done the same, excuse me, immediately recognizes. The arid cad pat, you see that, okay, that guy was probably in Afghanistan. I wore that uniform. I get it. And it doesn't matter what your trade was. And then you go to the the higher end stuff like Shaun, for example. You have that sense of camaraderie and brotherhood, and 10, 15, 20 years out, maybe you've lost touch with a whole bunch of those guys that you did so much with, but then you have that little symbol, your pool room, your basement, or just folded quietly in the corner. And you see it drinking your coffee in the morning, and it just kind of comes back to you, and you're just like, yes. And you kind of
Precisely
get
that.
that sense of pride, of sense of accomplishment. And that is what I started the whole company for people to really have that pride in what they've done and what they've accomplished.
Well, mission accomplished. And by the way, that hat that you're wearing currently, if I'm not wrong, I believe that a form of uniform was incorporated into that design. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. So a good buddy of mine went to high school with, actually. He joined the Army immediately post-graduation, RMC grad, etc. He deployed with PPCLI to Afghanistan twice. Served in combat there before going on to the special operations community. He happened to find an old one of his combat tops that he wore in the Panjwai in combat operations, and he had seen other things that have been done in other countries in terms of this kind of idea. And he says, "Hey, I want you to have a Canadian-made one. I'm going to donate my uniform to you." And we were able to make it happen. So this piece of uniform here is got the sweat, the dust of Panjwai in it, and we created it, put it into a leather patch, and put it on a hat so that people can kind of own a little piece of that history from that conflict, which defined many people's lives for the 15 years that it was going on.
Yeah, I love that, man. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is. And actually, I have the arid splatter flag. I have that flying outside of my front door, and I've had many people mention it. I see people walking past my house, and I go, "Ooh, what's that? Oh, wow!" And they like look at it, and so it's. I've had people come up to my door and knock and be like, "What's up with this flag?"
How great is that as a conversation
That's pretty
starter,
cool.
as the curiosity, and then you get to tell your story a little bit and maybe open somebody's eyes to something that they were never aware of or had even thought of. With Afghanistan, our official combat role being done in 2015 there now. Was it 2014? 15 was the last casualty for sure.
2012 was when our combat operations stopped. 2014 was when we actually pulled out, and then 2015 I think was the last casualty from Special Forces, I think.
Right. Sorry. Correction. Because Byron Greff was the final casualty in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But that is so far removed from people's everyday life and memory now. It was a headline
Dude,
news
it's
every day.
it's removed from mine. I mean, I didn't know that. I should know that. I should know who the last one was. I should, but I didn't. And to your point, we all should know those kind of things.
Yeah, we really should. It's a hard lesson for a lot of people too, is that especially Afghanistan, the average person was not affected by Afghanistan in really any way, shape, or form. They went about their day. They woke up every morning and they went to work and they did their.
I'm gonna push back on that in a whole different way, but I'll wait till you finish, because you're right. But then I want to add a little bit more complexity to it.
So what I was going to say about it was the fact that by telling our stories, by adding in little pieces of history, like the hat, like the flags, like the like the podcasts, like the fact that you're wearing a Pathfinder shirt, like the fact that I got a little sapper thing right here on my microphone, right? All these little things that most people don't know about. It gives the opportunity for them to ask questions, which then gives the opportunity to then inform the rest of the public. And it's on us. If we want, the public to be involved in the history and be touched by it, even by a little bit, same way, in a similar way we were, then it's on us to bring it forward. And we're the ones that have to tell the story.
100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. But let me add now a little interesting angle on this fact or this moment. You'd said that Afghanistan was going on, and most Canadians weren't aware of what was going on.
I said they weren't affected by it.
Okay, sorry. Yes, weren't affected by it. At face value, you're right, but at a deeper level, you're wrong, in the sense of they were all affected. The entire country was. They just don't know how yet. Or why, or when, or where. And it kind of goes like this. You came back to Canada and you were affected, which means that everyone around you was affected. But they just don't know how they've been affected yet. So year 1, year 10, year 20, all kinds of different effects coming out of that. It constantly affects our country, and it can affect it in good ways or in bad ways. But whatever the ways that it's being affected, no one can fully understand it until we start talking about it and start trending it and start figuring out how to, whatever it is, move it forward in a better direction. So I believe that at face value, you're right. But at a deeper level, the entire country was affected. It just doesn't know it.
Yeah. That's a great
There's
point.
a great comment there. A story told is a story learned that just came in there.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the point. And going to Shaun's thing, the tens of thousands of people that went over to Afghanistan and served, every single one of them came back and they told a story of some kind that happened on their deployment to a family member, a friend, whatever. And then those kind of branch out and anchor out, and more people hear about those. But Canadians, typically we're not the most boastful people, and in comparison to the Americans and how much they put out in pro-military, pro-support, um, everything. Canada's just not like that, and I think we've almost done ourselves a disservice, especially during those harder war years, of not really telling what was really going on and the hardships that a lot of people suffered, and how many people have suffered since coming back, other than the 159 that we lost overseas, which is ongoing, still an ongoing problem now. And that's something that, without the conversations, we're never going to correct.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. There's it's actually another comment here that I accidentally skipped over, but it applies as effort applied is basic, knowledge is basic. Applying effort with knowledge is advanced. And I think that this goes into what you were saying, Shaun, in that we don't really know the effect of something until we have the depth of time and experience to really see what the effect is. And while you were talking, it reminded me of the fact that I spoke at my kids' school for Remembrance Day in my uniform. I got to affect those that chunk of children in my neighborhood with my story from Afghanistan, which allowed them to now be affected by it 10 years, 20 years down the road, right? Which I think that's I like the fact you brought up the depth of the matter, because as you said, in the moment, you're right. Perhaps they weren't affected at that time, but they are affected over time.
Yeah, and just to add one more simple thought to what you just said, I think it's awesome that you got to do that at the school, etc. But let's just call it what it was. It was a moment that was an arranged moment, an organized moment.
Yep.
We'll call it a construct in time that allowed you to present something. But that's rare that happens. Maybe once a year, as an example, on Remembrance Day. But all the other days of the year where there is no constructed moment or no opportunity to present to the masses in a formal setting, guess what's happening on the regular? We're all doing that anyway, but most of us are doing it unaware. Like, we just do our thing, and if anyone watches what we're doing, hopefully what we're doing is good. But if, as a veteran, you've had a rough go of it and you're really not happy with the world around you, okay, you're not presenting to all the school kids on Remembrance Day and saying, this is what happened, this is what's important, this is blah, blah, blah. That sort of stuff is happening on the regular every single day when people think nobody's watching. When that guy who's angry with the world driving down the highway, flipping everyone the bird and beeping his horn and cutting traffic off and whatever, he's just not dealing with the fallout of being in those circumstances. He's now representing something that he's unaware of that he's representing. But everyone around him on that highway is drawing conclusions that are negative in respect to the larger group called maybe the entire military or maybe all veterans or what have you. So my point being this, that was an awesome opportunity for you to represent in a righteous manner on a single day, but we all do it every day. And most of the time we're unaware of how we're representing because we're not actually consciously thinking about how to do it right.
Yeah, and how we're carrying ourselves in day to day. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, it reminds me of in basic, I believe, I got told this pretty kind of over and over. Every time we were about to go on leave or when we got the weekend off or something like that, we were told, understand that you are no longer Chance Burles, right? It's not just you anymore. It is, if anything goes wrong and your name ends up in the newspaper, it's not Chance Burles. It's Canadian Forces soldier Chance Pearls, right? Is that
true, man.
you represent the entire organization, and that
Yep.
you
And
need
you
to
still
uphold
do.
yourself. Absolutely.
You
And
will
that,
until the day you die and beyond.
That's right.
yeah.
Yep. You will always have that moniker. Yep.
And the thing I think we forget is that we have a bearing, right? We walk around with a bearing, and there are people with veterans plates on their vehicle like mine. And if you act in a certain way that is, unbecoming, that doesn't mean you need to be, um, 100%. You don't have to keep the haircut, and you don't have to keep the, standard of folding your clothes, and you don't need, like, that stuff is not what's important. What's important is living well to promote the idea. I think you and I were talking about this on the podcast, Jason, when I had you on mine, was it behooves the nation to turn out well-adjusted veterans, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the highest level. I would call it the highest level of public service one can actually give. You are signing on the dotted line to give your life and limb for the country, more so than any other public service I think you could list. So you would think that it would be in the government's best interest to take care of those people and within the service and out. To in a sense, it's kind of wording it poorly, but like to put out their best product, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the reason that isn't considered more thoroughly or maybe respected more widely across Canada is the fact that no one freaking talks about it.
Yeah.
You're Jason, you're right, but no one publicly puts that out on the daily. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Generally speaking, the public looks at a service like that as something they don't want to consider, they don't want to look at and face, they don't want to acknowledge because it's it's a foreign concept to a lot of people who've never served in uniform in that capacity. And so I don't think we do a very good job as an organization, veterans,
Terrible
or
job.
or as
Terrible
a
job.
institution, the Canadian
Yeah.
Armed Forces. We
Yeah.
just don't do a good job of putting across precisely what you just said, but in a more palatable way so
Yeah.
that all the demographic can make. I don't want everyone to stand up and give a round of applause every day. I don't even want them to stand taller and nod me every day. I just want people to be aware of the sacrifices that are made on their behalf every single day that most people don't know anything about.
Yeah, they have no understanding of it. Yeah.
No understanding.
It's funny. I made this joke at one point in time that you could live in Edmonton, and if you live south of a particular street, you don't even know there's a base there. And then after a little while of being on base in Edmonton and walking around, it's 100% true. I happen to be downtown. I happen to be in uniform, and somebody was like, "Ooh, wow, nice. Where are you stationed at?" I'm like, "Here." They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what do you mean?"
Similar
Like,
story.
and they're like, "Are you at the recruiting center downtown?" I'm like, "No, at the base here in Edmonton." They're like, "Oh, there's a base here in Edmonton." I'm like, "Yes,
Yeah, it's
quite a
not
large one, in
unusual.
fact." And it's not. That's the real sad part is that it just we don't, you know. There, so I think you guys have probably seen it. I know I've seen it, and through units have keys to the city, right? And they can parade at any point in time, and they can do whatever. Or it's not keys to the city, but I can't remember the actual.
Yeah, it
Anyway.
can be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, why aren't we using that more? Like, I thought of this, again, a great idea. I brought up to my chain of command. I was like, why aren't we doing a bridging exercise down in the river valley in Edmonton? Why aren't we showing off that, what our capabilities are and actually working, showing people what we can do? Because that'd be a wicked exercise to actually bridge the river downtown.
Yeah,
Or
like
do
we're
it the
here
river.
for you representing the population. This is where your taxes go.
Yeah.
We are your employees. Here's what we're doing. That would be a great show of force, essentially. But everything is so tiptoe politically correct these days. It's just it's wild to me. Yeah. I remember I
Agreed.
had a similar instance to you, Chance. I was picking up I was having my truck service in Victoria, and came directly from work. I'm in my flight suit, green overalls, ranks, squadron patches, everything. And a gentleman in his 60s, I'm kind of guessing, but looked at me. He's like, "Wow, it's a really clean painter suit. Must be brand new." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "No, like, because I'm wearing coveralls, right?" I'm like, "No, it's a flight suit." He's like, "We have a military base here." I'm like, "Yeah, the airport that was built,
We have
you know,
planes.
yeah, that was built as a military training facility back in the day.
Yeah.
Also, the entire Western Canadian naval fleet that's in Esquimalt, and you didn't know there was a military base here? Like how is that possible? I don't get it.
I wonder if it has to do with personal insecurity. Um, Winterstorm put up a comment here. People want to ignore the things that go bump in the night, and the people that hunt those are constant reminders. That's a good point. But do you think it's a more of a like people don't want to know about it, or do you think it's just a general ignorance? Like we don't do a good enough job
Where's your band-aids right
exhibiting it?
now in your house?
They're upstairs in my bathroom.
All right. So most people don't.
Yep.
Okay, that's a good
And
point.
so that's the point. When someone wants a band-aid becomes important. Until then, they have no idea where the band-aid is. And so when trouble comes, everyone turns around and starts looking at each other thinking, how are we going to solve the trouble? That's when the fixers become important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Until
Why weren't we
then,
prepared for this?
yeah, right. Until then, the problem doesn't exist. We don't need a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And therefore, I'm going to keep stumbling around hoping that I never need a band-aid. That's kind of how it works.
Mm.
I think one of the major issues with that is that Canada, as a whole, as a nation, we are probably the most geographically blessed country on the planet.
Oh,
Oh
we
boy,
are so
are we
lucky.
ever?
We
Are
have
we
the
ever?
North Pole to our north. We have Alaska, which is the United States, bordering us and Russia. We have the largest military in the world below us in terms of capability and spending power and force projection. And then, the world's two largest oceans on each side. We are so far away from the rest of the world's problems. It's unbelievable. And I think that it's almost a spoiled rotten situation for the average Canadian. Thinks like,
Agreed.
well, those problems are somewhere else,
Yeah.
And you look at what's gone on, even the Eastern European air policing and training things that have gone on with NATO, and then the subsequent invasion of Ukraine and the NATO support that's gone in there. Ask those countries about what their military is doing and training, and I bet you almost any civilian could answer because they're so hyper aware of it because it's on their doorstep, and we do
Yeah.
not have that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me that like this morning in a live chat, I was speaking with Yuri from Ukraine. I mean, he's right there.
Yeah.
I've spoken with that guy a bunch of times, and if not for Yuri in Ukraine, and of course Glenn Kirkland that I've spoken with, who recently came back from Ukraine. I mean, people that I know just wouldn't know how to spell Ukraine,
Mhm.
and so they just have they're disconnected from we'll call it the violent world wrapped around our peaceful country because it's of no concern of theirs because it's not right up in their grill.
Yep.
That just as long as the bus isn't late that morning, that
Yeah.
life is good. But
Ignorance is bliss.
that ain't ignorance is bliss. But that ain't the case in a lot of countries around us. And by the way, we're about a split second from a problem most days. It's just that most Canadians are oblivious to it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Now this actually leads into my next question. So I was scrolling through Instagram last night, and I came across a reel done by Funkers Tactical,
Hmm.
and he was asking the question: do warriors lose courage over time? And he goes on to I'm just going to share my screen so we can actually all watch it together,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that way
I
we
like
can
fancy
pick it apart.
stuff.
Yeah. So let me just get it up here.
I love your James Cameron moments. Bring that Hollywood production.
Advanced podcasting. Yeah.
So here we go. So I'm gonna see if I can get the audio working here too, because
of the past. Now, I don't necessarily think that hearts have anything to do with it. I think it has more to do with circumstance. Life was harder then. Technology could not compensate for skill development in the same way that they can today. World War I is different than Afghanistan or Thermopylae. I'm quite hesitant to believe that we have a lesser capacity for courage today. I just believe that perhaps the warriors today don't have to face the same circumstances as their predecessors. Were they any less scared of death on the battlefield back then than they are today? I wonder. I'm not a warrior, and these questions are not about the common man or society as a whole. It is specifically about the warrior class, a class of which I do not belong. Now, for the easier question.
So there's a lot to take in there all at once.
There is.
But,
yeah.
The question that I really wanted to get into is, do you think, not just in terms of, warriors or warrior nations or soldiers or whatever term you want to give it, I think of it in terms of people. Do you think that we have, as humans, gained either or lost the ability to manage stress, or do you think that our levels of stress or the levels of ability to manage stress have increased based on the fact that there's more stress in the world, and we're just trying to come to an equilibrium?
I'll say this, while I was watching that video, and I'd need to watch it from the start, and I need to pay a little bit deeper, closer attention to what he was saying.
Okay.
But here's my first brush at this conversation. I think he's way off base. And as he was saying it, I had to type in courage into my webpage over here just to make sure that I was right with the definition, to see if he was using some sort of bizarre definition that I'm unfamiliar with. But I'll read the first definition that came up. It's this: courage, the ability to do something that frightens one, or strength in the face of pain or grief. Now, I don't care like what point in history a person chooses Thermopylae, which was spelled wrong, by the way, in that video,
Yeah.
or etc.
That's the voice to text.
I
Thermopylae,
understand.
yeah.
I understand. Just for everyone else out there who might be looking up that word incorrectly, doesn't matter what point in history it is. A warrior is a warrior. And what does a warrior have? They have courage. And what is courage? You face whatever's in front of you and you take care of business. It doesn't matter whether it's with a spear and a shield or a C7 or a freaking laser blaster, man. It doesn't matter what point in history. A warrior requires courage, and everything else that's wrapped around them is just white noise, in my opinion.
That's a great point.
I wasn't sure how to originally take that question when you posed it, Chance. I wasn't sure if he was talking about somebody who has, served, deployed, done their thing, and then 20 or 30 years later, they're not as courageous a person. But I think that he's more referring to, as times have changed from ancient Greeks to modern warfare, has the definition of courage changed? And I would totally disagree with that. Imagine taking modern weaponry to the Battle of Thermopylae and how much fear you would instill in somebody standing there with, in a skirt with a sword and a shield, and you have a rifle. Yeah. How scared is that guy going to be? Artillery, rockets, a single fighter aircraft. It's totally relative to the time, the technology, and the battle space. And I don't think courage has changed at all. It's just different. It's just different these days versus then.
Yeah, and to use that to build off that, I'd say that if I showed up with a C7 and was lined up against a bunch of warriors at Thermopylae, well, here's what I know would happen: they'd still come at me.
Yeah,
they'd still try to ram a sword through my throat. Because
you'd just be able to drop so many of them before they even get
until
to you.
I run out of ammo.
Yeah,
and then I'm getting my head cut off by a warrior who's courageous. He doesn't know how the magic bullets are happening. He doesn't know how my Harry Potter wand works. He just knows that all of his brothers are falling down next to him, and he's still going to have the courage to stop that.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because I thought it was I thought the concept of the question was excellent, because again, a lot of people don't know, and a lot of they look at when you look at history and you wonder whether or not, the people today would be able to handle situations from the past, right? If you take an average citizen and you bring them back to just the lifestyle of ancient Greece, that would be horribly traumatic.
Oh,
Horribly traumatic,
they
right?
couldn't handle it. Yeah.
No, lifestyle is just too different. But in the same manner, if you were to bring someone from ancient Greece and you put them in the modern day world, that would be horribly traumatic. They have no idea the sensory overload and just constant noise and all this stuff. One of
Yeah, but
the
a warrior would adapt.
warrior would adapt,
Like
absolutely.
if I'm a Greek warrior and you transport or beam me into present day world, and I show up in like a short skirt and maybe some sort of vestlet or whatever, and I've got nothing in my hands, and I land right on a crosswalk and cars are coming towards me, here's what I'm going to do: get out of the way, scan a 360, see what threats I've got, see what opportunities are in front of me, start manufacturing solutions, and carry on. And
Yeah.
and if anyone's going to go on the offensive, I'm going to take care of that. And if everyone's on the defensive, I'm going to move through that world in that next few minutes, figuring out how to optimize it for me. And if any other of my brothers got transported from Thermopylae onto that crosswalk, then as a team, we're going to optimize our path forward with whatever direction we feel is appropriate for us at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I one of the examples he uses is the fact that World War One was a different landscape of battle. World War II is a different landscape of battle. Thermopylae is a different landscape of battle, and he's 100% right. They are different landscapes, and the people fighting in them come from different lifestyles. In that, like, one of the soldiers that signed up in early 1914 that went to go fight for their God and country, they went into that from they went into that knowing they want to give their life for God and country. That was just instilled in them. That's how they lived. That was every day. Whereas nowadays, you don't see that type of. I guess you don't see it as often, right? And if you,
It's not as common.
Not as common. And I think that now, I think that was the spirit.
But by the way,
of the question.
courage isn't as common.
That's true. You want to dive into that a little bit?
I've never really thought about talking about it, but I guess at first blush, I'd say this, that, courage is formed through hardship times. And let's face it, the Middle Ages were a whole lot harder than our present day. And so, courage was crafted through the heat of the fire and getting smashed against an anvil your entire life. You're shaped through the adversity of the Middle Ages. And so when it comes time to be courageous, it's not an abstract thought of, I read it on Wikipedia once, courage is being this, and now I've got to figure out how to be courageous. Middle Ages, there was no Wikipedia. There was just hard graft. And that hard life taught you how to be courageous in the tiny moments. And over a lot of tiny moments, you learned how to stack those together. So when the time came for you to be large courageous, it wasn't like a foreign concept. It wasn't an obscure thought process that you read once on Wikipedia. It was life.
Yeah.
And so World War I, all the guys stacked under the edge of the trench, all about to go over the edge and know full well that in about 10 seconds they're all going to die, because that's just the way it was, which is horrific. But given that circumstance, when the bugle sounded and everyone went over the edge, they went over as a group, knowing that they're going to die, with the courage to do it on behalf of not just themselves and represent themselves, but to do it alongside of the other guy who was thinking the same thing. I don't want to die. But the group courage took them over the edge for a higher cause that allowed them to execute.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot to be said for, the fact that as the battlefield evolves, the warrior does as well. But at the root of it, it's still about the man next to you,
Courage is
or the
courage,
woman
man.
next to you, right? And that's,
Yep.
I think that's what in my mind, that's what makes a warrior, is that they are willing and able to sacrifice for the group.
Yep.
At least in
Face
my
the
thought.
adversity. If
Yeah.
you're a warrior, you will face adversity all your life. It's not only just a happenstance moment. You encourage yourself to face adversity as a warrior. You want to face hardship as a warrior. And I don't think it's something, if you want to consider yourself as a warrior in the warrior lifestyle, it's not a matter of convenience. I've got a spare weekend. I think I'm going to go be a warrior this weekend. And then I'll maybe touch on being a warrior again sometime 3 or 4 years from now for a day. I mean, you either are or you aren't.
Yeah.
And if you are, you keep your nose to the grindstone and you keep your blade relatively sharp, not hoping that you get to use it, but being prepared if you need to use it. That's what a warrior does.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that there, Jason?
Yeah, you're exactly right, but you can apply it to everything in every facet of life. We use it from the military sense, but anybody who's really willing to go out and better themselves and take that hard step, and then that next hard step, and then look back 100 steps later and be like, I can't believe I started. You look where I am now. That's kind of the same mindset, just
Agreed.
in a little bit of a different context. And I'm all for it. As long as everybody's trying to go out, self-improve, it's awesome to me.
Yeah, I think there's way more similarities than there are differences in respect to a warrior lifestyle versus a non-warrior lifestyle. Any lifestyle should progress forward.
Yeah. Imagine, the overweight person who wants to get in shape and thinks, oh, they can never do it. And then they take that first step and then they walk into a gym for the first time, knowing that they're totally out of shape and think that they're going to be embarrassed and looked at and laughed at, but then they keep it up and they keep going.
The greatest warrior in that gym at that moment.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I love seeing that at the gym.
That.
It's amazing. And I'm a bigger, stronger guy. Like to go over and like kind of quietly, without making them think that they're embarrassed, be like, "Hey, awesome to see you! Like,
Yeah, nice work.
keep doing it."
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that little bit of appreciation probably goes miles for them. Just that little bit of somebody noticed, and they're not. There's no judgment there. It's just
Yeah,
absolutely.
but then do you know where it goes? Do you know how it builds from there? Any thoughts?
I have no idea. You keep seeing them. And then sometimes I change gyms, or maybe they change gyms, or whatever. But I have seen some people who've look incredible a year and a half later, and they probably thought they would never get there, but they put in the time and the work, and that's how you achieve results.
Yeah, you achieve results by leading the way through your example, which of course that individual is doing over a period of a year and a half. Perhaps now they're sort of jacked. But the greater lesson, as I see it, is Jason walks over to that person on day one who's obviously way out of shape, and you say, "Hey, man, I'm a big fan. Keep going." And then you step away and you never see them again. The seed was planted then. For that person to sometime in the future quietly walk over to that next dude and say, "Hey, man, you know what? I'm a big fan. Keep going."
Yep. I was going to say it quantum entangles everybody.
Quantum entangles.
And there's this lesson I learned. I think I've said it before on some other podcasts, but when I was doing my basic mountain ops course, one of the lessons we taught, or that we were taught, was once you get to the top, if you're the first person up the mountain, or the second person, or the 10th person, doesn't matter. Once you get up to the top of the rope and you unclip and you can turn and just walk on, carry on with whatever it is you were doing. But ideally, what they say is once you get to the top, you turn around, you put your hand out for that next person. And if they take it, they take it. If not, no bigs, right? But just the act of turning around and putting your hand out gives the opportunity for betterment of everybody.
Yeah, well, let me just add 2 things here real quick. So there is a third option there, which I see happening out in the real world, and it's this. Dude climbs to the top, gets to the top, looks around, doesn't decide to just walk off, doesn't decide to just lend a hand and pull up the other dude. What he does is he looks over the edge and then kicks a freaking rock down the hill.
Mm.
And now everyone down the rope, down below, is having to duck his rocks that he's kicking down just because he's mean-spirited.
Yeah.
I mean, it
that's
happens.
That's the ego. That's the ego coming
That's
back
the
to pride
ego, for
versus
sure.
ego. Like look at me, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And another thing that came to mind is for anyone who's had to stealth through the bush in the pitch black with heavy loads, it's hard work. But it's made even harder with someone who doesn't care about working well within a small organization. And by that, I mean, when you're moving through hard terrain with branches and so on and so forth, you're either that guy who ninja stealths through and takes that branch and steps it aside and then slides through and carefully puts it back in place, or lets the guy behind him know, come on through, and holds that branch, and you do the silent nod even though you can hardly see each other, and then you keep on moving through as a cohesive unit.
Yeah.
But there's always that dude who he's either not a team player or he's never been taught the way, that he might not be crashing through in the pitch black, but he doesn't care about the dude behind him. And now that dude's getting whipped in the eye every 5 minutes by a branch, and it's just not bueno. And so you got to learn how to play the game, but you got to learn how to play with everyone else in the game.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're almost an hour, man. Wow.
Dude, where does the time go?
The time just disappears.
Blasted. Yeah.
So I guess do we have any final thoughts on this? Courage, warrior abilities, warrior mentalities, or even going back to our original thought of hindrances. Any final thoughts on any of those?
I think we've covered them all pretty well, pretty immense, pretty in depth. I think the overbearing message is to just keep moving forward, take pride in what you're doing, big or small, fight that battle, win it. Doesn't matter how long it takes.
Yeah,
and know that you're setting the standard for everyone around you who you may not think is paying attention. And so always do your best and lead from the front if you can, even if you don't feel like you belong at the front. Charge hard so that others can see you charging.
Yeah. Be a keener.
Be a keener.
Be a keener. It's funny. It's used so derogatorily within the military, but it's so just be a keener. Enjoy what you do, man. Enjoy being good at it. Enjoy learning how to do it. Enjoy
do
at
better.
It. Just enjoy.
Yeah.
And just be better. That's it, man.
Not at the cost of other people and blading others in your group, though.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy.
You need to be a blade. Just don't blade your buddy.
Yeah. Blade the objective. How about that?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this will be one of the first times we finish before the hour, but
not because we want to, but it's just kind
to.
of working out that way. It's
we've
weird.
We've hit the right amount of words. I don't know. we hit the number. But
Jason bringing the professionalism, maybe.
Yeah,
that's
man.
it.
I think that's what it was. It was really on the mark about it.
I don't know about that. Appreciate
but first off, I do want to say, really thank you for being on here, Jason. It was awesome chat. You have an open seat any day, anytime. You're welcome to come back and join us.
I'm still working on my podcast skills. This is my second one ever. I kind of got a face for radio, but we'll work our way through it. This is my courage coming through. Here we go.
I disagree.
Well, if you've got a face for radio, then I've got a face for silent movies.
I was gonna say.
Brilliant.
So what? That was the first one that you and I did. Was that your first, and then this is your second?
Yeah. That was it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Good job, buddy.
That's wicked, man. Yeah. That's awesome. So Winter Storm, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks
Thank
for
you for doing stuff. Yeah. Absolutely. And I can't wait to carry on with this. With more. We just have more stuff. I'm really enjoying every day I get to show up here and talk about cool stuff.
Yeah, me too.
And any final thoughts? Anything before we go?
No, just thanks for bringing it, buddy. It was awesome to see you in front of the camera, but it was just awesome for your wisdom to get deployed out into the interweb. So I dig it. Yeah.
So we're gonna bring you back on here more times so you get more experience. Just so you know.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
awesome.
We're not letting you go. All right, and we'll, as Jason gets to learn, build, and grow his podcast skills. We all get to learn, build, and grow our own skills here on The Collective. And we'll see y'all tomorrow.
Awesome.
Chimo.
Cheers, guys.
Chimo.